My sister announced my bankruptcy at a family reunion, so I bought her dream lake house and made her apologize in front of everyone. Anyway, here's my story. My name's Morgan Reynolds. I'm 35, living in Connecticut, and if I had $1 for every time I was compared to my older sister Natalie, I could probably buy out half the neighborhood. From the time I was old enough to tie my shoes, she was the benchmark I was held to. Natalie, the golden child. Natalie, the one who always had her act together. Natalie, who somehow made mediocrity look like excellence, as long as it sparkled. Let me be real with you. Natalie's never actually accomplished much. She dropped out of college halfway through her sophomore year, floated from one dead-end job to another, and yet somehow, in every family conversation, she was this glowing figure of success. Why? Because she curated this image. High-end clothes she couldn't afford, rented apartments in trendy neighborhoods, a new car every other year that screamed lease agreement. She was like the human version of one of those fake storefronts they use on movie sets. Looked great from a distance, but there was nothing behind it. Meanwhile, I built my business from scratch. I started a digital branding agency out of my tiny two-bedroom after I got laid off from a marketing firm in my late 20s. It wasn't glamorous, especially not at first. I lived on black coffee and ramen for 2 years, barely keeping the lights on while hustling freelance gigs just to stay afloat. But I kept at it. And eventually, things clicked. I got my first major client, then another, and slowly turned my side hustle into a legit operation. Now I've got a team of 8, steady revenue, and I'm pulling 6 figures consistently. But you'd never know that if you listen to how my family talks. Because to them, Natalie's still the star. She's always been manipulative, but it was subtle at first. Back in high school, she'd take credit for things I did. I remember once, I won a regional art contest. The piece was this acrylic skyline I'd stayed up 3 nights straight to finish. She went around telling everyone she helped me conceptualize it, and even got a mention during the parent-teacher meeting. That was just the start. As we got older, she upped the ante. She'd ask to borrow my clothes or makeup and conveniently forget to return them. She once asked to borrow my resume template, which she used almost word for word for a job I had been eyeing myself. When I confronted her, she brushed it off with this smug smile and said, "It's not like I copied your personality, Morgan." But the real kicker was how our parents never saw it, or didn't want to. My mom has this blind spot the size of Texas when it comes to Natalie. She's just trying her best, she'd say every time Natalie screwed something up. She has such a good heart, she'd tell me when I pointed out yet another instance of Natalie mooching off someone. Even when Natalie forged my signature once, no exaggeration, on a loan application she didn't qualify for, my dad just said, "Well, she probably thought you wouldn't mind." I did mind. A lot. I spent weeks cleaning up that mess. Had to explain it to my accountant, had to prove it to my bank. Natalie never apologized. She said something vague like, "I thought I'd get approved and pay it off before you even noticed." That was her logic. If it worked out, I shouldn't care. And if it didn't? Well, I was the dependable one. The cleanup crew. Over the years, Natalie's scams got more polished. She'd throw these lavish parties in rented spaces and post about them like she was living the dream. Reality? Half the time, she was bouncing checks or sweet-talking her way out of security deposits. She dated a string of men with flashy jobs who usually bailed the second they realized she couldn't manage a budget to save her life. But at every family event, she'd hold court, talking about her ventures and her plans, while my parents nodded along like she was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Meanwhile, I could be sitting at the table literally closing deals on my laptop, and all I'd get was, "That's nice, Morgan. But when are you going to settle down?" Like success only counts if you've got a ring on your finger. There was a moment, a real turning point for me, about 2 years ago. I'd just landed a major contract with a tech startup in Boston. Huge win for me. One of those deals that shifts your whole trajectory. I told my parents during Sunday dinner, expecting at least some acknowledgement. Natalie interrupted me halfway through my explanation to talk about a spa weekend she'd booked for mental clarity. My mom leaned in and asked, "Are you going too, Natalie?" Like I hadn't said a word. That night, I realized something I probably should have accepted a long time ago. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being deliberately sidelined. Natalie didn't just want to shine. She needed to make sure no one else outshone her. Especially not me. So I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on my work. I bought a townhouse, paid off my student loans, started saving aggressively. I stopped bringing my wins to the dinner table and watched as they slowly stopped asking. And I was okay with that. Really, I was. Because I knew what I'd built, and I didn't need their validation. But the kicker? Even now, even after all this time, Natalie still tries to compete. She found out about a new client I signed last fall, a well-known fashion brand, and the next week, she announced she was starting a luxury lifestyle consultancy. which is basically code for I post on Instagram and hope someone pays me. She still borrows money from our parents, still shows up at family gatherings in outfits she can't afford, and somehow still walks away as the favorite. But I'm done playing the game. Let her have the spotlight. I've got the real thing. When I first started my company, I didn't even have a desk, just a busted secondhand laptop and a folding chair I dragged from the kitchen. The idea came from a mix of frustration and late-night YouTube spirals. I was sick of seeing cheap plastic decor flooding the market, all mass-produced nonsense with no soul. I'd always loved woodworking, and I had this old cabinet I refinished in my 20s that people wouldn't stop complimenting. One night I just thought, screw it, maybe there's a business here. So I started small. Handmade shelving, reclaimed wood coasters, a few upcycled furniture pieces. I listed them on Etsy under a name that felt way too earnest at the time, Green Nest Living, and posted like 3 blurry product photos I took on my phone. That first month, I sold a $28 wall shelf to someone in Portland, and I remember dancing in my living room like I'd just hit the lottery. What no one saw was the 18-hour days that followed. I worked my day job at a design firm from 9 to 5, came home, ate whatever was cheapest at Trader Joe's, and built, painted, and packed orders till 2 a.m. I lived off ramen, canned beans, and black coffee for over a year. I couldn't afford help, so I did everything myself. I was the designer, the builder, the copywriter, the social media manager, the customer service rep. My apartment smelled like wood stain and cardboard boxes. There were nights I slept on the floor because my bedroom was filled with product inventory. I gave up nights out, birthdays, vacations. I sold my car and took the bus through Connecticut winters to save on insurance. Every cent I made I put back into the business. New tools, better materials, better packaging, a better website. There were months I couldn't make rent and had to beg my landlord for an extension, all while pretending to the world like things were taking off. But slowly, painfully, it grew. I hit my first $10,000 month around year 3. Hired my first part-time assistant 6 months after that. I finally moved into a studio space, just a dusty corner of an old warehouse downtown, but it felt like a castle. By year 5, I had 5 employees, 3 contractors, a clean supply chain, and a real brand presence. Our designs were featured in an eco-lifestyle blog, then a Green Home Expo in New York, and finally Entrepreneur magazine ran a spotlight on us under 10 sustainable startups to watch. I read that article at least 10 times. I wanted to believe that maybe, finally, my family would see it and acknowledge what I'd built. They didn't. I emailed them the link. Crickets. I printed a copy and brought it to Thanksgiving dinner. My mom flipped through it absent-mindedly between bites of turkey and said something like, "Oh, that's nice, sweetie," before changing the subject to Natalie's new yoga instructor. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. But the part that really got me, the part that still sits like a weight in my chest, was what Natalie did. She saw the magazine. I know she did because she posted about it on Instagram with a picture of the article and a caption that said, "Proud mentor moment. Watching my baby sister grow her brand into something real." She tagged me in it. She actually had the nerve to call herself my mentor. Like she was the one who taught me how to source responsibly, or how to deal with delayed shipments, or how to rebuild a Shopify site after a data breach at 3 a.m. She told people we started the company together, claimed she'd helped me secure early suppliers, and guided the marketing strategy. She was doing podcasts, interviews, telling our story as if she'd been right there beside me in that freezing warehouse with splinters in her hands and no health insurance. She wasn't. She never was. And when I confronted her, asked her, not even angrily, just plainly, why she was lying, she shrugged and said, "It's just PR, Morgan. It helps both of us." Then she smiled and added, "You're welcome." I walked out before I said something I'd regret. But the thing is, people believed her. Even some of my extended family started calling her with business questions instead of me. A cousin asked Natalie if she could get me to design their new kitchen layout, as if I was her employee. She just smiled and said, "I'll see what I can do." No matter how far I got, I was still in her shadow, a shadow she didn't earn, but one she cast anyway. And I let her, for a while, because I kept hoping my work would speak for itself, that the sweat, the years, the success, all of it would finally cut through the noise. It didn't. Not with them. To this day, when my mom introduces me at parties, she says, "This is my daughter Morgan. She does that eco thing with Natalie." I just nod. Because what else can I do? I built something real. And she built a spotlight. Turns out that's all some people ever want to look at. About 6 months before the reunion, everything started to fall apart. Not gradually. Not with warning signs. Just one day, everything was humming along. And the next, I got a call that changed the entire course of my business. One of our major raw material suppliers, a certified sustainable lumber company out of Vermont we'd been working with for over 3 years, went bankrupt. Completely out of the blue. No heads up, no transition plan. Just a brief email confirming the shutdown and a voicemail from their CEO that sounded like he hadn't slept in weeks. I remember sitting at my desk that morning, staring at the screen like maybe if I refreshed my inbox, the email would disappear. We relied on them for almost 60% of our product line. Everything from our wall panels to the custom-cut legs on our best-selling coffee tables. I had 2 large orders scheduled to ship that week and nothing to fill them with. I scrambled to find alternatives, but sustainable certified lumber isn't like popping into Home Depot. The lead times are brutal, and the good suppliers are booked months out. I tried pivoting, rewriting descriptions, offering customers alternatives. Some stayed. Most didn't. Within 2 weeks, we were bleeding money. Clients canceled pre-orders, refunds piled up, and our buffer, the emergency fund I'd worked so damn hard to build, vanished like it had never existed. I tried holding things together with duct tape and hope, but the numbers didn't lie. We weren't going to survive unless I found capital. Fast. So I took out a loan. High interest, short term, the kind of deal you only make when you're desperate and still believe you can pull off a miracle. I signed the paperwork late at night, sitting under a fluorescent bulb in my warehouse office, trying not to let my hands shake. That loan saved the company from immediate collapse, but also wrapped a noose around my neck I knew I'd be wearing for a long time. I cut my own salary to 0. Let go of 2 employees I'd hired straight out of school. That was one of the worst days of my life. I downsized production, paused new development, and shifted everything to restructuring. I spent the next 3 months living on oatmeal and black coffee again, trying to rebuild supplier relationships, get extensions from vendors, convince customers to stick with us. Every single day was a battle just to survive. And then, as if the stress wasn't enough, things started getting weird. I got an anonymous tip from someone I'd worked with at a previous design expo, just a casual DM that said, "Heads up, Natalie's been asking around about your financials. Thought you should know." At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always been nosy, always wanted to insert herself into the business so she could brag about being in the loop. But then I heard she'd been meeting with someone from my old bank, a guy who used to manage my business account before I switched to a credit union. She'd taken him out to lunch, asked hypothetical questions about small business risk, about short-term debt exposure. Nothing illegal, not yet, but close, too close. A week later, my assistant found a printed page on the break room counter, a spreadsheet that detailed our loan terms, our debt-to-income ratio, and a section labeled projected cash burnout. It wasn't ours. We don't print that stuff. And it wasn't even from our system. It was formatted in a style that looked like a third-party aggregator, the kind banks and investors use for internal risk assessment. Someone had accessed sensitive data, compiled it into a snapshot, and left it sitting out in plain sight. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into a full-on drop. I started tracing everything, changed passwords, locked down every file, notified my attorney, and still, I couldn't prove anything. But I didn't need to, because I knew exactly who would benefit from this kind of sabotage. Natalie. She was the only one who stood to gain anything by watching me crash. She'd never built anything of her own. Not really, just floated on perception and proximity. But if I failed publicly, especially at the peak of what looked like success, she could rewrite the story. Frame it like I'd overreached, made poor decisions. Like I was the naive younger sister who flew too close to the sun. And she, of course, would be the one who saw it coming. The family reunion was always held in mid-July. It wasn't just a backyard barbecue. It was a performance. Everyone showed up dressed like they were being filmed for some nostalgia-laced documentary about good old American values. My parents rented the same tent every year, hired a caterer, had live music. It was all for show. And this year, I knew, would be Natalie's. She'd already been hinting at big surprises in the family group chat, talking about how this year would be different and how she had something special planned for everyone. I knew her well enough to hear what was between the lines. She wanted to embarrass me, to air out whatever she thought she'd found, to weaponize my vulnerability in front of the only audience that still believed she was relevant. So I did something I never do. I preempted her. The night before the reunion, I posted a message in the group chat. Short, honest. Just a heads up, I won't be attending this year. I'm currently restructuring the business after a major supplier bankruptcy, and I'm focused on rebuilding. If anyone's curious about what that means, I'm happy to explain it like an adult, just not in the middle of a garden party. Best of luck to everyone. Morgan. The fallout was predictable. My mom texted privately, asking if I was okay. My dad called and left a rambling voicemail about keeping our heads high and not airing dirty laundry. Natalie, of course, said nothing. But I heard from my cousin 2 days later that she'd printed out some document, waved it around like it was evidence, and made vague comments about how some people just aren't cut out for entrepreneurship. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because while she was out there playing at relevance, I was in my studio at 2 a.m. trying to keep my company alive. And that, for better or worse, was real. The house had been her obsession for years. Not just any house. The lakefront estate on Winnipesaukee with the curved glass walls and the wraparound deck and the private dock where she once declared, over wine she hadn't paid for, that she would one day host influencer retreats there. It was the crown jewel in her fantasy life, the background for her mood boards, the setting for her Pinterest-perfect existence that never existed beyond her filtered posts. She saw it once on a girls' weekend. Some realtor friend let them tour it as a favor, and ever since then, she talked about it like it was her birthright. She called it the retreat, like it already belonged to her, like it was just a matter of time. Even my parents got in on it, joking about how our Natalie was going to make it big one day and buy that house with all her consulting income. The same income that didn't pay for her own rent more than half the time. I never thought much about the place back then. It was just another part of her performance. Until everything fell apart and I started putting myself back together, piece by piece. And somewhere in that process, I saw a listing, a quiet reappearance. No fanfare, no flashy rebranding. Just a price drop and a motivated seller. The dream house was back on the market. And this time, I was ready. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about something deeper. A sense of reclaiming. Of stepping outside of her shadow and choosing, deliberately, something she had always assumed was hers. I didn't want to live there. I didn't even particularly like the lake. But I wanted the deed. I wanted the key. I wanted that quiet, unmistakable moment where the story shifted and I was no longer the one being written over. So I created a shell company, standard practice, nothing sketchy, and kept everything locked down tight. No direct contact, no personal signatures, just an attorney, a financial advisor, and a very specific set of instructions. Full purchase, cash. No financing. No counteroffers. /$950, 000 wired within 24 hours of acceptance. The sale went through without a hitch. The seller was relieved to be done with it. The documents were signed. The property transferred. And just like that, I owned the house that Natalie had built an entire persona around. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my closest friends knew what I'd done. It wasn't for them. It wasn't even for Natalie, really. It was for me. I went there once. Alone. Took the long drive up. Brought a thermos of coffee and a backpack with a sweatshirt and a notebook. It was early autumn. Just cold enough to see your breath if you stood still. And the trees around the lake had started turning that deep, fire orange you only get in New Hampshire. The house was quiet. Empty. The deck creaked when I stepped onto it. I unlocked the sliding doors and walked through each room slowly, like I was moving through someone else's dream. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel like mine. And I didn't need it to. I stayed a few hours. Took one photo, not for social media, just to prove to myself it happened. Then locked it all up and drove home. No one greeted me when I got back. No one toasted to my silent victory. But I slept better that night than I had in months. Natalie still doesn't know. As far as I'm aware, she thinks some tech investor snatched it up. She ranted in the group chat about it. Said she was this close to putting in an offer and how the universe always seems to block her when she's on the verge of greatness. I didn't respond. I just read the messages and turn off my phone. Because finally, after years of being erased and rewritten, I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need anyone to clap or notice or validate. I had the one thing that mattered most. Control. I wasn't there when she made the announcement, but I've heard the story enough times now to play it in my head like a bad high school play. According to my cousin Ava, it happened right after dinner. Everyone was lounging in the backyard under those fake twinkle lights my parents insist on stringing up for every gathering. Plates still full of half-eaten pie, coffee being passed around. That usual lull in conversation where people are either too full or too bored to pretend they're having a great time. That's when Natalie stood up. Ava said she tapped her wine glass like they were at a wedding, then gave this long, performative sigh. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, the classic opener for someone who planned every word down to the dramatic pause. But I feel like the family deserves transparency, especially in difficult times. She glanced around like she was waiting for someone to stop her. No one did. I know some of you have been wondering about Morgan, she said, pausing like she was trying to keep from getting emotional. And it's not my story to tell, but I just think she needs our compassion right now. My aunt apparently leaned forward, all concerned, and asked if I was okay. And that was all the invitation Natalie needed. She launched into this monologue about how I had been struggling for a while, how things hadn't been going well with the business, and how, tragically, I'd finally had to close up shop. She used words like bankruptcy, and insurmountable debt, claimed I'd moved out of my home and was looking for something more stable. Then, and this is the part that makes my blood boil, she told everyone not to worry, because she, of course, was stepping in. She said she had offered to let me live in her apartment, that she was actively helping me look for a job, and that we've all leaned on each other at some point, and now it's Morgan's turn. Ava told me people actually clapped. Clapped. My mom apparently wiped away a tear. My dad nodded solemnly. My uncle patted Natalie on the back and called her a real rock. They ate it up, every bit of it. Because she delivered it with that confident, I've got this tone she's perfected over the years. The same tone she used when she explained why she didn't finish college or why she needed another loan or why her failed marketing agency wasn't really a failure, but a strategic pivot. No one questioned it. Not even the parts that made no sense. I wasn't there. I hadn't said anything. But they filled in the blanks with their own assumptions, because Natalie gave them just enough to feel like they were in the loop without actually knowing a thing. And what stung most was that this lie, like every other lie she's told about me, wasn't for my benefit. It wasn't even about me. It was about her. About looking generous. About being the savior. She used my name like a prop, my struggles like stage direction, and played the role of the benevolent older sister with the perfect blend of humility and self-importance. When Ava called me the next day to check in, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She didn't know what to believe. And honestly, I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to defend myself. I didn't want to start calling people and issuing corrections like a press release, because that would mean I was still playing her game. But I did clarify one thing. I told Ava I hadn't gone bankrupt, that the business had hit a rough patch, sure, but we were restructuring, not collapsing. I told her I had never asked Natalie for help, that I wasn't living in anyone's apartment, and that I had no intention of applying for jobs she'd lined up. Ava was quiet for a while after that. Then she laughed, not because it was funny, but because she realized just how absurd it all was. She really made it sound like you were sleeping on her couch, she said. Yeah, I replied. Well, she's always had a vivid imagination. What I didn't say was that I'd paid for the couch she was probably sitting on when she made that speech. That half the furniture in her apartment came from me helping her redesign her space, back when she pretended to be an interior stylist. That if anyone had been the rock, it had been me. But those stories don't get told. Not out loud. Not in front of twinkle lights and pie and applause. And that's fine, because the truth doesn't need a stage. I told her to meet me for a walkthrough the next morning, framed it like a favor, like I had a friend who was looking for advice on staging a new property and I needed a second opinion. She agreed immediately, probably flattered that I'd come to her for help after the little performance she put on at the reunion. She had no idea. When she pulled up to the house, she parked her leased SUV right at the edge of the curved gravel drive like she belonged there, like she was arriving to claim something. I watched her from the upstairs loft window. She got out slowly, sunglasses on, phone in hand, scanning the view like she was already picturing herself on the brochure. She didn't even knock. Just walked up to the front door and waited for me to open it, like the place was familiar. Nice of your friend to pick this one, she said the moment she stepped inside. Though they're definitely out of their depth if they think they can handle this kind of layout without help. I didn't answer right away. I let her walk through the living room, up to the panoramic window wall that looked out over the lake. She was talking about light angles and furniture placement, already offering unsolicited tips about what she'd do differently, how she'd rearrange the space. I walked past her, into the kitchen, and set the key on the marble island. Just one key, on a plain ring. She followed me in, still rambling, until she saw it. What's that? The key, I said calmly. To the house. She tilted her head. Right, but why is it here? Because it's mine. She blinked. Once. Twice. The silence dragged. I bought it, I said. In cash. 6 weeks ago. The pause that followed was unlike any silence I'd ever had with her. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was stunned. It was real. No, she said eventually, flat, like a glitch in her voice. No, that's not. You said you were in debt. That your business was. I didn't say anything. I cut in. You did. You made a speech. Told everyone I'd gone bankrupt. Said I'd be crashing on your couch. She looked pale suddenly, like her own words were coming back to her with the weight they actually carried. I needed this, I continued, softer now. Not to humiliate you. Not to rub anything in. Just to remind you, and maybe myself, that you don't get to write my story. You never did. She didn't respond right away. She reached for the key, held it in her hand, like touching it would change the outcome. Then she laughed. Quiet at first. Bitter. A laugh that cracked around the edges. I thought you were done, she said. Everything I heard. I thought you were going under. You made sure everyone thought that, I replied. It gave you a nice spotlight. She set the key back down. I was jealous, she said finally. I've always been jealous of you. I talk big, but I don't have any of this. I'm behind on rent. Credit cards are maxed. I haven't had a paying client in 4 months. I leaned against the counter, watching her. I spent so much time trying to seem like I had it together, she continued, not looking at me now. Because if I didn't, then what else did I have? You were always the quiet one, the stable one, the one who actually worked for what she got. And I faked it. I faked all of it. I didn't say anything. I just let her sit in it. Because for once, she wasn't spinning it. She wasn't twisting the story. She was just standing in the truth. We didn't argue. We didn't hug. She didn't ask me for help, and I didn't offer it. Eventually, she left, said she had a thing downtown, which I'm sure was a lie. I watched her drive off without saying goodbye. The key was still on the counter. I stayed a while longer. Not because I wanted to, but because the silence felt different after she left. It felt like the house was mine, for real now. Not as a symbol, not as a message, but because I had earned it. Every inch of it. Every wall, every window, every quiet square foot that didn't need to be filled with noise. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I waited a few days after the meeting at the house. Not because I was unsure. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but because I needed to let the silence settle. Let it marinate in both our heads, especially hers. I didn't want this to be reactive. I wanted it to be deliberate, clean. Not a continuation of some sisterly Cold War where we traded emotional debt like currency. When I called her, her voice was quiet, almost cautious. She didn't ask why I was calling. She just said, "Hey," like she'd been expecting it. "I've been thinking," I said, "and I'm willing to let you use the house. Temporarily. A few weeks. Maybe longer." There was a pause. Not the kind where she's trying to manufacture drama. The real kind, where the weight of what's being offered takes a second to land. "Are you serious?" she said finally. "Yes," I said. "But there are conditions." I didn't sugarcoat them. I didn't dress them up with pleasantries or put them in some fake, sisterly frame. I gave them to her straight. "First, I want a public apology. Not to me. To the family. I want you to correct what you said. All of it. No spin. No half-truths. I want people to know I didn't go bankrupt, that I didn't beg for a couch, that I was never dependent on you." She didn't interrupt. That was already a small miracle. "Second," I said, "if you're going to stay here, I want honesty. Financial honesty. No pretending. No curated narratives. You tell me exactly where you stand. What's due, what's overdue, what's real. Not because I need to manage it. Because I won't let this place become another stage." Another pause. "And third," I said, "this ends now. The performance. The games. The fake mentorship. The quiet digs at dinners. If you want to stay here, if you want anything real with me moving forward, that part of us ends today. No more competition. No more pretending like you're the big sister saving the day. We either stand next to each other honestly, or we don't stand together at all." There was a long silence after that. I could hear her breathing through the receiver. The kind of deep, deliberate inhale people take when they're trying not to cry. "I can do that," she said. Her voice cracked, just slightly. "I will do that." She didn't ask for time. She didn't negotiate. She just accepted it. The apology came later that night. A long message in the family group chat, uncharacteristically straightforward. She admitted she'd spoken out of turn, that she'd made assumptions, that her comments about me were inaccurate and unfair. She said she let her own fears color the story and that she owed me, and the truth, better. No hashtags. No dramatic flair. Just text. Plain and overdue. She sent me a breakdown of her finances the next day. A spreadsheet, surprisingly neat, with notes about what was past due and what she was trying to settle. It was the first time I'd seen her admit vulnerability in a way that wasn't dressed up as inspiration. She even wrote, "I don't expect you to fix this. I just thought you should know what's actually true." And the games? They stopped. At least for now. No veiled comments. No passive-aggressive one-liners in front of our parents. Just space. And a strange, unfamiliar kind of quiet between us that felt less like tension and more like relief. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. It wasn't trust either, not the kind you build in a week. But it was something real. And for the first time in 20 years, it wasn't about who looked better, who earned more, who won. It was just two people, standing in the mess they made, trying, in their own clumsy way, to start again. At the next family gathering, Natalie stood up again. Same backyard, same string lights, same folding chairs scraping against the patio. But this time, no glass tapping, no smug lead-in. She just stood up quietly while people were mid-conversation and said, "I need to say something." At first, I thought she might bail halfway through. She looked nervous. No makeup, no curated outfit. Just jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back like she didn't want anything to distract from what she had to say. "I wasn't honest with you all," she began. And just like that, The whole patio went quiet. About Morgan. About myself. About a lot of things. She didn't go overboard. No tears, no theatrics. She admitted that she'd twisted the truth because she felt like she was losing control. That she'd used my name, my business, my life as a way to make herself seem more together than she was. She said she had been performing for a long time, and in doing so, had pushed me out of the picture even when I was the one actually building something. I said I was the mentor, she said. But the truth is, Morgan has been the one leading by example. Quietly, without asking for attention or credit. And I made that a thread instead of a lesson. There was no applause this time. Just silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that comes when people are listening, actually listening, instead of waiting for their turn to speak. After she sat back down, I stood up. I hadn't planned to, but sometimes things just fall into place. I thanked her. Not with a speech, just a few words. Then I looked at everyone and told them the truth. The house on the lake, I said, it's mine. I bought it. But I'm not keeping it all to myself. I told them I wanted it to be a shared space. A place for birthdays, holidays, weekends away. A reset button for our family. Not for optics, not for show, but because maybe if we had somewhere to be real, we'd stop leaning on all the fake stuff. And something changed after that. Not instantly. Not like a movie where everything's fixed in one scene. But something shifted. Natalie and I started spending weekends there. Just the two of us sometimes. Other times with my niece or our cousins. No cameras. No curated moments. We took turns cooking. We argued over music. We stayed up way too late watching documentaries and talking about how weird it was that we were finally speaking to each other like actual people. She started paying her bills. Slowly, but on time. She stopped referring to herself as my business partner when talking to strangers. And I stopped assuming everything she said was another performance. We weren't friends yet. Not in the way we might have been if things had gone differently. But we were something better than we'd been in 20 years. And here's the thing. The house didn't fix it. Owning that place didn't win anything. The real victory wasn't in the property. It was in hearing her say the things I'd waited 2 decades to hear. It was in saying the things I'd swallowed for just as long. The house was just the backdrop. The honesty, the quiet, shaky, not quite polished truth. That's what changed everything.